Nikola Tesla is considered one of the most innovative and mysterious men who ever lived. If Tesla hadn't invented and researched everything he did in his time, our technology today would be considerably worse. But is there something more to Tesla? Did he in fact have contact with aliens as he publicly proclaimed? He is one of the most amazing inventors our civilization has ever known. His knowledge and ideas went far and beyond what was known and accepted in his lifetime. Nikola Tesla was born around midnight, between July 9 and July 10, 1856 in what is now Croatia, during a fierce lightning storm. According to family legend, midway through the birth, the midwife wrung her hands and declared the lightning a bad omen. "This child will be a child of darkness," she said, to which his mother replied, "No, he will be a child of light." Tesla was a genius, and his inventions and ideas had no boundaries. Over 100 years ago, during the first decade of the 20th century, Tesla filed a request to patent a peculiar aircraft, which he called the world's first flying saucer, the world's first man-made UFO. The methods used in the design of the flying saucer matched the descriptions of those who claimed to have seen a from the UFO inside, with a discoidal capacitor with sufficient size to provide enough thrust to fly, while other small capacitors allowed to control the direction of the flying saucer, to which he added a gyroscopic stabilization system and a electric drive control. And if all of that isn't enough, Tesla had more. The interior of the ship was equipped with flat screens and external video cameras for the pilot's blind spots. Tesla's interest in electrical invention was spurred by his mother, Duke Amandic, who invented small household appliances in her spare time while her son was growing up. Tesla's father, Milutin Tesla, was a priest and a writer, and he pushed for his son to join the priesthood, but Nikola's interests lay squarely in the sciences. After studying at the Realschule Karlstadt, later renamed the Johann Rudolf Glauber Realschule Karlstadt, the Polytechnic Institute in Graz, Austria, and the University of Prague during the 1870s, Tesla moved to Budapest, where for a time he worked at the Central Telephone Exchange. It was while in Budapest that the idea for the induction motor first came to Tesla. But after several years of trying to gain interest in his invention, at age 28 Tesla decided to leave Europe for America. In 1884 Tesla arrived the United States with little more than the clothes on his back and a letter of introduction to famed inventor and business mogul Thomas Edison, whose DC-based electrical works were fast becoming the standard in the country. Edison hired Tesla, and the two men were soon working tirelessly alongside each other, making improvements to Edison's inventions. However, several months later, the two parted ways due to a conflicting business-scientific relationship, attributed by historians to their incredibly different personalities. While Edison was a power figure who focused on marketing and financial success, Tesla was commercially out of tune and somewhat vulnerable. After parting ways with Edison, in 1885 Tesla received funding for the Tesla Electric Light Company and was tasked by his investors to develop improved arc lighting. After successfully doing so, However, Tesla was forced out of the venture and for a time had to work as a manual laborer in order to survive. His luck changed in 1887, when he was able to find interest in his AC electrical system and funding for his new Tesla Electric Company, setting straight to work. By the end of the year, Tesla had successfully filed several patents for AC-based inventions. Tesla's AC system eventually caught the attention of American engineer and businessman George Westinghouse, who was seeking a solution to supplying the nation with long-distance power. Convinced that Tesla's inventions would help him achieve this, in 1888 he purchased his patents for $60,000 in cash and stock in the Westinghouse Corporation. As interest in an alternating current system grew, Tesla and Westinghouse were put in direct competition with Thomas Edison, who was intent on selling his direct current system to the nation. A negative press campaign was soon waged by Edison, in an attempt to undermine interest in AC power. Tesla, for his part, continued in his work, and would patent several more inventions during this period, including the Tesla coil, which laid the foundation for wireless technologies and is still used in radio technology today. Having become obsessed with the wireless transmission of energy, around 1900 Nikola set to work on his boldest project yet, to build a global wireless communication system, to be transmitted through a large electrical tower, for sharing information and providing free electricity throughout the world. With funding from a group of investors that included financial giant J.P. Morgan, in 1901 Tesla began work on the project in earnest, designing and building a lab with a power plant and a massive transmission tower on a site on Long Island, New York, that became known as Wardenclyffe. However, when doubts arose among his investors about the plausibility of Tesla's system and his rival, Guglielmo Marconi, with the financial support of Andrew Carnegie and Thomas Edison, continued to make great advances with his own radio technologies, Tesla had no choice but to abandon the project. The Wardenclyffe staff was laid off in 1906 and by 1915 the site had fallen into foreclosure. 2 years later Tesla declared bankruptcy and the tower was dismantled and sold for scrap to help pay the debts he had accrued. Most UFOs are Tesla's flying saucers. Nikola Tesla, the man who, as many believe, was almost buried in forgotten history until her recent surge in interest over the past few decades. Nikola Tesla's inventions and technological breakthroughs are so incredible advanced, many are still baffled by what he invented over 120 years ago that is just now coming into recent public tech use. The rumors that surround the man are almost as fascinating as the facts. Tales of alien encounters and other strange psychic abilities all surround the fable and myth that make up the image many have of Nikola Tesla in the current age, and sometimes that is for good reason. Tesla's dynamic theory of gravity. The dynamic theory of gravity of Nikola Tesla explains the relation between gravitation and electromagnetic force as a unified field theory, a model over matter, the ether, and energy. It is a unified field theory to unify all the fundamental forces, such as the force between all masses, and particle responses into a single theoretical framework. Tesla published a prepared statement on his 81st birthday, July 10, 1937, critiquing Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. The following is a portion of that statement. Supposing that the bodies act upon the surrounding space causing curving of the same, it appears to my simple mind that the curved spaces must react on the bodies, and producing the opposite effects, straightening out the curves, since action and reaction are coexisting. It follows that the supposed curvature of space is entirely impossible, but even if it existed it would not explain the motions of the bodies as observed. Only the existence of a field of force can account for the motions of the bodies as observed, and its assumption dispenses with space curvature. All literature on this subject is futile and destined to oblivion. Through all attempts to explain the workings of the universe without recognizing the existence of the ether and the indispensable function it plays in the phenomena, my second discovery was of a physical truth of the greatest importance. As I have searched the entire scientific records in more than a half-dozen languages for a long time without finding the least anticipation, I consider myself the original discoverer of this truth, which can be expressed by the statement, "There is no energy in matter other than that received from the environment." Nikola Tesla.
My name is Alfred Bielik, more commonly known as Al Bielik. I have been involved in the Philadelphia experiment, the Montauk Project, time travel, alien connections at the Montauk Project, and some other projects, all of which have been secret over the years, most of which have never been declassified, and involved many people. A principal among them was, of course, Nikola Tesla.
October 28, 1943. Was the date of one of the most significant scientific experiments in history, the so-called Philadelphia experiment. The goal was to make ships invisible to radar. But the result exceeded all expectations. Placed in a powerful electromagnetic field, the U.S. Navy destroyer, Eldridge, disappeared not only from the screens, but also from our reality. The ship materialized once again hundreds of miles from Philadelphia at the military base of Norfolk, Virginia, with a crazed crew on board. All records of the tragedy have been kept secret. But there was a rumor linking the experiment with the great inventor Nikola Tesla, who supposedly made all the necessary calculations and drawings and provided generators that were used for the teleportation of the Eldridge. There is some evidence that these fluxes in space and time can be artificially induced. This appears to have been the case with the Eldridge, which took part in the Philadelphia experiment on August 15, 1943. The brilliant inventor Nikola Tesla and the theoretician Albert Einstein are both reported to have been involved in this experiment. The object was to render the ship invisible by wrapping the hull in inch-thick cable through which a high-frequency signal from an elaborate system of generators and Tesla coils was induced. The awesome technology that was used on the 15th of August, 1943, was technology that had been in the makings under Dr. Nikola Tesla's guidance since the early 1930s. Having had much success, the technology eventually was placed in the hands of our U.S. government and overseen by the Naval Department for national security interests. By the time our government got involved, the possibilities of the technology had already been proven beyond a doubt of its abilities. In 1895, while conducting research with his step-up transformer, Nikola Tesla had his first indications that time and space could be influenced by using highly charged rotating magnetic fields. Part of this revelation came about from Tesla's experimentation with radio frequencies and the transmission of electrical energy through the atmosphere. Tesla's simple discovery would, years later, lead to the infamous Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk time travel projects. But even before these highly top-secret military programs came about, Tesla made some fascinating discoveries on the nature of time and the real possibilities of time travel with these experiments in high-voltage electricity and magnetic fields. Tesla discovered that time and space could be breached, or warped, creating a doorway that could lead to other time frames. But with this monumental discovery, Tesla also discovered, through personal experience, the very real dangers inherent with time travel. Tesla's first brush with time travel came in March 1895. A reporter for the New York Herald wrote on March 13 that he came across the inventor in a small cafe, looking shaken after being hit by 3.5 million volts. "I am afraid," said Tesla, "that you won't find me a pleasant companion tonight. The fact is I was almost killed today. The spark jumped 3 feet through the air and struck me here on the right shoulder. If my assistant had not turned off the current instantly, and might have been the end of me." Tesla, on contact with the resonating electromagnetic charge, found himself outside his time frame reference. He reported that he could see the immediate past, present and future, all at once, but he was paralyzed within the electromagnetic field. Unable to help himself, his assistant, by turning off the current, released Tesla before any permanent damage was done. A repeat of this very incident would occur years later during the Philadelphia experiment. Unfortunately, the sailors involved were left outside their time frame reference for too long, with disastrous results. Tesla's secret time travel experiments would continue on in the hands of others who were not as concerned with humanity as Tesla. In the 1930s, Nikola Tesla got involved with a group which was experimenting with moving through the time-space continuum. In the early 1930s, the University of Chicago investigated the possibility of invisibility through the use of electricity. In 1939, this project was moved to Princeton's Institute of Advanced Studies. This is not far from Philadelphia. There they were able to make small objects invisible. They presented this technology to the government, the military, because we were at war, wanted to pursue it in a direction. Tesla had come to the same conclusion that Einstein did, that this technology, if developed, would not be used for the benefit of mankind. Dr. Albert Einstein was also involved, and to a greater degree than most know. In fact, it was his special theory of relativity, which became the theoretical cornerstone describing the release of nuclear energy, and concerns itself with relationships between energy, time, matter, and the speed of light. In his proposed general theory of relativity, he suggested that the universe is four-dimensional, the three dimensions of space, length, depth and breadth, plus time, but space, instead of being flat as he had suggested in his special theory, was now curved, and that gravity was a consequence of his proposed space curvature. You see, Einstein's general theory was so astoundingly successful that scientists worldwide rapidly accepted it, and who in turn, after re-evaluation, took their experimentation into the new direction in which Einstein had pointed. In short, Einstein vectored mankind onto a new timeline. His theories made it possible for the warping, bending or the morphing of time, black holes, traveling through time, and yes, even UFOs. Einstein was also convinced that there was a link between the laws of electromagnetism and gravity, and that it could be expressed in a mathematical formula, known as the unified field theory. Therefore, he himself was not thoroughly convinced that as theories of relativity explained our physical universe or reality in its totality. Many scientists were also out to prove Einstein wrong, one of whom was Tesla. Tesla had already conducted successful experimentation where Einstein was only on the fringes of understanding anti-gravity and antimatter. History has been written depicting that Einstein did not live to complete his work on this theory. I got involved with the project in 1938 and worked closely with Tesla, the government's project director, interviewed by a panel of men, mostly scientists, which included Tesla and some military. I was hired to work with the project primarily because of my abilities and training in physics, geometry and electronics. I was very much involved during the theorem and thorium stages and realized that we were just at the beginning stages of understanding radiation. There were numerous round-table discussions with many individuals from different walks of life and philosophies that were not only from the scientific and military communities, but also from religious and metaphysical societies. We all had our own assignments and timetables, restricting our involvement with other aspects in the development of the technology. Additionally, much of the work was contracted out. It was designed so that the right hand never knew what the left hand was doing and vice versa. All issues were handled in this manner for the sole purpose of secrecy. My role also included the preparation and installation of the technology on the ship. Shortly after being with the project, I was able to distinguish the different motives by the different groups of people involved. The three key agendas that were very much part of this experimentation were: a scientific agenda, which was to explore the time-space continuum for scientific discovery; a military agenda, since we were at war, WW2, they wanted this ability as a weapon, to move personnel and cargo instantaneously from one point to another; and lastly, an extraterrestrial agenda, which was to map out the Earth's planetary magnetic gridwork for interdimensional travel. In 1943, the government conducted a test using domestic animals on a ship. The ship that was eventually used for the experiment, the U.S. Eldridge, was commissioned at the New York Navy Yard on August 27, 1943, Department of the Navy. The animals were placed in metal cages on the U.S. Eldridge. The ship became invisible, but when it materialized, many of the animals were missing on head radiation and other burn marks on them. Humans were not to be tested, yet on August 12, 1943, the U.S. Eldridge with a full crew aboard reportedly underwent the Philadelphia experiment. The men did not know what was to happen. The generators were fired up, the switches were thrown, the ship disappeared and all seemed well. However, others claim that the experiment took place on October 28, 1943. Substantial evidence points to the October date as being more accurate. The Navy has released the Eldridge's deck log and war diary, and at no time was the Eldridge in Philadelphia. However, The records could have easily been changed. The results were disastrous. When activated, the ship generated a green fog and disappeared from Philadelphia, reappearing in Norfolk Harbor 24 hours later. Many of the crew ended up embedded in the walls of the ship. Others became insane. Some were mercifully dispatched with a pistol shot to the head. Here is a written account from one of the few survivors of the 176-man crew. Tesla was a genius of such magnitude that some doubt that he was actually human. Many of Tesla's inventions, like the free energy receiver and the long-range death ray, may have been suppressed to prevent the collapse of the electrical utility, coal and oil industries, or for reasons of national security.
If in a thunderstorm, the Earth is struck by lightning, the force creates concentric waves which slowly expand to circle the world until they come back to where they started. This proves to us that the Earth's crust is a conductor of electrical energy. Now, if we were to produce large quantities of electrical energy and if we directed it into the Earth's crust, then that energy would travel in concentric waves.
There were rumors you went to Colorado Springs in order to contact Mars. Is that true?
It is possible for us to send out waves which can travel around the world. There are waves as well which can travel into space.
How are you going to talk with them?
I never intended to. However, I recorded certain electrical impulses of unknown origin, and these were repeated at constantly timed intervals. It's possible they were a kind of signal from space.
And did you in turn send them a message?
Ask the Martians that question.
But you did send some sort of signal.
A signal which might not be received for 1,000,000 years.
Therefore, Mr. Tesla, you do believe communication with distant worlds may someday be possible.
Perhaps they've been sending us messages for ages, but we aren't aware of it.
Mr. Tesla, what's that big pile of papers down there on the floor?
My file on the work in Colorado Springs.
Can you tell us what's in it?
It's a new electrical system, completely different. As yet, it hasn't been finished.
In just what way is it different? How will it affect us?
Well, a great deal of it is merely guesswork, but it might have an important impact on the future. I hope it will lead to a decisive answer to the problem of energy. Good day, gentlemen.
Mr. Tesla,
That's all today. No more questions, please.
In 1931, Tesla announced to reporters at a press conference that he was on the verge of discovering an entirely new source of energy. Asked to explain the nature of the power, he replied, "The idea first came upon me as a tremendous shock. I can only say at this time that it will come from an entirely new and unsuspected source."
Gentlemen, I can make no guarantees other than my discoveries. I am not an insurance company. You must take my word. You will have to rely on instinct, intuition, and imagination.
War clouds were again darkening Europe. On the 11th of July 1934, the headline on the front page of the New York Times read, "Tesla, at 78. There's new death beam." The article reported that the new invention will send concentrated beams of particles through the free air of such tremendous energy that they will bring down a fleet of 10,000 enemy airplanes at a distance of 250 miles. Tesla stated that the death beam would make war impossible by offering every country an invisible Chinese wall. The idea generated considerable interest and controversy. Tesla went immediately to J.P. Morgan, Jr. in search of financing to build a prototype of his invention. Morgan was unconvinced. Tesla also attempted to deal directly with Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain of Great Britain, but when Chamberlain resigned upon discovering that he had been outmaneuvered by Hitler at Munich, interest in Tesla's anti-war weapon eventually collapsed. By 1937 it was clear that war would soon break out in Europe. Frustrated in his attempts to generate interest and financing for his peace beam, he sent an elaborate technical paper, including diagrams, to a number of allied nations including the United States, Canada, England, France, the Soviet Union, and Yugoslavia. Titled New Art of Projecting Concentrated Non-Dispersive Energy Through Natural Media, the paper provided the first technical description of what is today called a charged particle beam weapon. What set Tesla's proposal apart from the usual run of the fantasy death rays was a unique vacuum chamber with one end open to the atmosphere. Tesla devised a unique vacuum seal by directing a high-velocity airstream at the tip of his gun to maintain high vacuum. The necessary pumping action would be accomplished with a large Tesla turbine. Of all the countries to receive Tesla's proposal, the greatest interest came from the Soviet Union. In 1937, Tesla presented a plan to the Amtorg Trading Corporation, alleged Soviet arms front in New York City. 2 years later, in 1939, one stage of the plan was tested in the USSR and Tesla received a check for $25,000. Tesla hoped that his invention would be used for purely defensive purposes, and thus would become an anti-war machine. His system required a series of power plants located along a country's coast that would scan the skies in search of enemy aircraft. Since the beam was projected in a straight line, it was only effective for about 200 miles, the distance of the curvature of the Earth. Tesla also contemplated peacetime applications for his particle beam, one being to transmit power without wires over long distances. Another radical notion he proposed was to heat up portions of the upper atmosphere to light the sky at night, a man-made aurora borealis. Whether Tesla's idea was ever taken seriously is still a matter of conjecture. Most experts today consider his idea infeasible, though. His death beam bears an uncanny resemblance to the charged particle beam weapon developed by both the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Nonetheless, Tesla's dream for a technological means to end war seems as impossible now as it did when he proposed the idea in the 1930s. Tesla, death rays, are particle beams. Particle beams are special sorts of electromagnetic waves, a special sort of light. The white light or daily light is a mixture of different length of waves. White light is a mixture of many colors which can be separated. Red light has long waves whereas blue light has short waves. The waves making up a particle beam are quite different. Not only are all the waves the same length, but they are lined up so that the tops, peaks, of the waves coincide with each other. Particle beams can be concentrated into a tiny point. They have tremendous energy. Particle beams can produce enough heat to turn a metal into a vapor. They are accurate cutting tools that can even cut diamond, the hardest substance known to man. Particle beams are powerful enough to cut through metal in military operations. A particle beam can be bounced off a target such as an enemy airplane or ship to determine its distance and speed. Particle gyroscopes, guidance devices, are being developed to direct bombs and artillery shells to their target. Today, particle beams are used also in medicine, for microsurgery, in delicate brain surgery and for coagulation of bleeding vessels into the eye structure of retina. They are also used to treat detached retina. The particle knife is completely sterile and seals small blood vessels as it cuts, minimizing tissue bleeding. One of the more controversial topics involving Nikola Tesla is what became of many of his technical and scientific papers after he died in 1943, just before his death at the height of World War II. He claimed that he had perfected his so-called death beam, so it was natural that the FBI and other U.S. government agencies would be interested in any scientific ideas involving weaponry. Some were concerned that Tesla's papers might fall into the hands of the Axis powers or the Soviets. The morning after the inventor's death, his nephew Sava Kosanovich hurried to his uncle's room at the Hotel New Yorker. He was an up-and-coming Yugoslav official with suspected connections to the Communist Party in his country. By the time he arrived, Tesla's body had already been removed, and Kosanovich suspected that someone had already gone through his uncle's effects. Technical papers were missing, as well as a black notebook he knew Tesla kept, a notebook with several hundred pages, some of which were marked "Government." P. Foxworth, assistant director of the New York FBI office, was called in to investigate. According to Foxworth, the government was vitally interested in preserving Tesla's papers. 2 days after Tesla's death, representatives of the Office of Alien Property went to his room at the New Yorker hotel and seized all his possessions. For many years, scientists and researchers have sought for Tesla's missing papers with no apparent success. It is conceivable that if Nikola Tesla knew a means for accurately projecting lethal beams of energy through the atmosphere, he may have taken it to the grave with him.